So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We have a special treat here. We have a group of people who I think you'll find fascinating and the discussion fascinating. Just by a show of hands, who here believes that they're a lifelong learner? Right? See, everyone's passionate about learning. Everyone is interested in I'm assuming everyone's interested in developing other people, just like we are. We've made it a big part of our day jobs. And that's what we're going to do today. Talk a little bit about what the kinds of things that we're doing and what are the kinds of things that we are hearing, and share some insights with you. So as Cindy introduced, I'm Tal Goldhamer. I look after learning for EY Americas, so it's about 70,000 people in the 30 countries that make up the Americas. I'm relatively new to the formal role because we just recently created it about 2 years ago. I've spent the last 24 years serving audit clients and doing a little bit in learning and development as a side job, and 2 years ago I was asked to take on this role, and so I flipped my schedule, and I still do serve an audit client, but I spend a lot of my time now in the exciting area of learning and development. With that, I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, because they'll do a better job than I will, and they are quite impressive. So maybe we'll start to my left.
I am Susan Crosson. I work for the American Accounting Association. I am the director for the Center for Advancing Accounting Education. So whenever anybody has a question, I get that question and I attempt to answer it in a thoughtful manner. I also teach part-time at Emory University because I said I cannot be a director of accounting education unless I keep my street creds. So I'm going back next week and teaching my executive MBAs, and I'm excited.
And I will add before we move on, I'd looked this morning. How many of you know that Susan has a YouTube channel? Probably many of you do. Show of hands? Yeah. 9 million views as of this morning. Isn't that impressive?
A lot of desperate accountants.
She's a YouTube star.
It's a YouTube star right here. It's amazing. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Eric.
Good afternoon. I'm Eric Dingler. I'm the Chief Learning Officer for our Deloitte Audit US business. I've been in the role about 4 years, but I've had a variety of talent development leadership roles since the 80s when I started my career. I was an auditor and had a CPA back at that time. So I like to say I came full circle. I started my career out and now I'm back in it. But from a different angle. I'm very passionate around how do you create a critical mass of individuals with the capabilities that are needed in order to deliver high quality audits and add the insights to our clients.
Okay, great, thanks.
Michael Becker. I'm a partner in the National Assurance Department in BDO USA, and I oversee our assurance learning from interns all the way through partners. Started my career at BDO and have had 3 roles within it, starting in client service. And all along, have been now in the learning group at National for the last 7 to 8 years. And part of my passion has always been about making impact, and this has found a home in where I can do it more across the country.
And I'm Roger O'Donnell, an audit partner for KPMG US. I also have the opportunity to serve the global firm working on the development of our data and analytics strategy, deployment of our technology, the development of our people. That has afforded me the opportunity to speak with Susan on a number of these conferences and the topics that we're covering in terms of how we're using technology to really change the focus for our auditors and enhance their ability to do higher quality audits, enhance their professional skepticism, and really allow us to do a higher quality audit. So excited to talk about how we're doing that.
Great. And we'll also say that we wanted to make this sort of free-flowing. So I'll be asking them some questions, but we're also going to open it up to Q&A throughout the process. So we won't just save it for the end. So if you have questions, you hear something that you'd like us to delve into a little bit more deeper, just raise your hands, and I think there's some microphones roaming around. Maybe to start with, one of the things that we talked about when we were preparing for this panel is an understanding of how people learn. And there are different types of ways that people learn. Some are visual, some are auditory, some are kinesthetic, some just prefer reading and writing as a preference. There's a lot that's been learned about how people learn over the past number of years, especially with neuroscience focusing on learning and development the truth is that the way people learn hasn't changed significantly over the years. There's more distractions and there's maybe more venues to find ways to learn. But the way the human brain acquires information is not that different than it was hundreds and hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago. However, there's many more distractions, there's many more opportunities, and we know a lot more about that, and that's what we're going to spend a little bit of our time today talking about that. Maybe to start with, we'll start in the center with Eric. A lot has been said about DU, Deloitte University, and we know you spend a lot of time at DU. Thought maybe you can tell us a little bit about, do all your auditors go to DU, and what type of stuff do you do there versus virtual, and maybe a little bit about the curriculum that the auditors would go through at DU.
Absolutely, thanks. And there's a couple pictures just for you can get a sense of what DU is. Location, it's actually in Dallas, Texas. And all auditors go there the first 4 years. But let me set up and give you a little bit of context for how we think about our learning. We target 60% of our learning to be live, in person, and 40% to be virtual. That's just a benchmark we've said we believe is appropriate for our business, given the type of business we are. That's much higher than most of corporate America if you look at benchmarks for the live piece. A lot of them are a lot lower. We believe because our auditors and the rest of our professionals at Deloitte are at clients, they're very rarely in the office, et cetera, that this is about culture, and the other aspect is about ensuring a better quality delivery of that learning. About 50% of those 60%, 50% of those hours are actually delivered at DU. For our auditors, our first 4 years, they all have a week at DU sometime in April to June. And then for managers and above, they generally come to DU. We try to get them there once a year, but they're generally coming at least every 2 years. So people are getting there on a frequent basis. And that's important for building culture, connecting to the brand, networking, and then actually having a quality learning experience. One other guiding principle for us is that all new hires go there within 90 days, and we actually try to make it week 2 of their experience. They go there for a week. So that's a little bit about DU.
Great. Thank you. I remember I was flying, not too long ago, I was flying on a flight sitting next to a woman who was, I think, probably a new hire, and she was on her way down to DU, and she was studying. There was pre-work that she had to do,
absolutely.
And she was brushing up on the pre-work, which I said, that's amazing.
Yeah, we try to have pre-work, or for example, our first-year auditors, they have 3 days of stuff they need to do in week 1 to be ready for week 2 at DU.
Great. And Michael, how about you? How about it?
Yeah, for us, our comprehensive curriculum takes the span of various delivery means, some being group live, and break it out between what we do nationally at conferences versus what we do locally that we push down from national and have delivered locally. And then from an e-learning standpoint, whether it's webinars or on-demand self-studies, we do that as well with the curriculum. And I'd say the percentages are fairly similar, and probably over the years for you two, they've switched a little bit, and we're trying to find that exact point. We're shifting a lot more from webinars to trying to just keep those to just more current practice matters, but the on-demand self-study ones where it's self-directed, self-paced, has been a big build-up for us. And on the group live side, a lot of times I might have different stakeholders telling me we need training here. And I'm like, and you probably know this too, tell me what you're trying to accomplish and let us figure out where and how best to serve it. So we take into a lot of different considerations whether something would be better nationally across levels, or other times we find it's actually more impactful to have it at a local office level, where I call it vertical, where it's amongst different levels, where they could also even be within engagement teams and start implementing and talking about their engagements as well. So.
Great, thanks. You said you're shifting away, or you're limiting the amount of webinars that you're hosting?
Trying to. I mean, they're necessary and they're easy to do, and to invest in self-study ones that are interactive is really for something that's sustainable. So something that is just going to be a quarterly technical update, that's something that's not, it's going to change every quarter. What we are trying to do, though, and we'll probably get into this, is that this is just the formal training side of it. Informal training as far as on the job or on demand, whether it's little nano learnings, practice aids, messaging, that all combines into learning. So this is really just what we call pushing, but a push and a pull, and it's not push versus pull, it's push and pull. We have to push some stuff down, but we need to have all learning resources available for our professionals to pull when they need them at a point in time. So we use the moniker that training is the event, but learning is a process. And these might be points in time, but learning is going to continue on, and it'll be repurposed in various manners.
Sure, sure. And Roger, KPMG not too long ago announced a new center in Orlando, Florida, which is exciting. And I think there's going to be an innovation center there. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what KPMG is planning for Orlando and what is this innovation center?
Sure. So we are really excited about what we just announced, and we actually just broke ground back in May of this year on a new center for us that spans 800,000 square feet, has accommodations for up to about 800 people to be able to come into a facility that really allows us to do many of the things that Eric was describing in terms of networking, the building up the environment that's conducive for the professionals to learn some of the skills that they need to have, but also to be able to understand industry trends, technology trends, changes. If anything, sitting in the panel this morning and listening to them talk about the level of disruption and the changes that affect risk assessment, we want to have a facility that allows people to really understand that, have an experiential learning center that allows them to bring together current technology, brings together leading experts, both in and outside the firm, to be able to understand what the issues are that our companies face, the people we serve, being able to react to that based upon the disciplines that we have, and being able to certainly then deliver high-quality results in what we're doing on our day jobs. But we think that the ability to do that through an in-person facility really will enhance our capabilities of bringing together a cohesive message and allowing people to really understand what is it that we want them to be doing day in, day out.
Great, thank you. When we think about first-year associates, and a lot has been talked about amongst us and amongst others around the knowledge, the skill sets of first-year associates, maybe Eric and Michael will put the question to both of you. When you think about the challenges that you face with the application of knowledge for first-year associates, what are some of those challenges that you're facing and how are you overcoming them?
Sure. All right. A couple thoughts. So when I think about first years, and we think about what's happening in the space of technology and how it's changing how we do audits, what we're seeing is that there's some of the knowledge and just skill application work that we expected or historically our first years have done is now becoming increasingly automated. What's becoming increasingly important for first years and for all our professionals is they need to rely even upon human interactions to get their work done and upon what I call the skills of discernment. The skills to really be able to evaluate sources, be able to understand what are the relationships that I should be seeing behind this data. Questions around completeness and accuracy, and can I rely upon the output of how the work is changing? And so whether it's discernment, critical thinking, we're seeing that becoming increasingly important. It's one of the things I'm concerned, I don't have kids, but as an uncle, I'm concerned that I see in my nieces and nephews that their first reaction on everything is to search. They search. And just because it appears at the top of the list doesn't mean it's good or quality, but they just take it and spout it off. And so I think that those skills of discernment are becoming increasingly critical as how we do our work changes. And so as I look at our first years coming in, it is those skills that we are beginning to pivot. We, 4 weeks ago, had 60 audit professionals come to DU for the weekend. They volunteered, from staff to senior manager. And we gave them everything we currently teach our first years. And we said, it was a Shark Tank type of concept. We said, blow it up. You tell us how you would do it. And make presentations to us on Sunday afternoon. And they really pushed us and challenged us. But the themes were more use of video, smaller chunks, teach me the theory. Don't teach me the steps of a work plan, but teach me the theory so I can evaluate. And performance support. We had 3 teams actually design for us in 3 days an entire performance support tool, so that gives things just in time. So those were the themes that came out of that we need to address based on how they learn.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Does everyone know what performance support is? that familiar with that term? Performance support is as Eric said, it's access to information just in time. So as you're in the flow of doing a job, the ability to know where I can go and get access to the information or the tools that I need at that moment in time as I'm performing. So it's supporting the performance. It's not necessarily something that you would teach people in advance. It's something that you'd make available to people and teach them how to go and get it when they need it. So, thanks, Eric.
I'd add on that to the knowledge of accounting and auditing. None of us in the firms are taking that for granted of what's being done at academia, but the buzz things that we're hearing are more so on the higher order skills and business acumen. We heard this morning about risk assessment. First thing was talked about was understanding the client's business, trying to hear about what management is thinking and what potential challenges they have or what risks can be there. And these are places that our staff are starting to get involved in. And so from that standpoint to communications to any critical thinking. But one thing I did want to mention though is when we're up here and for all the academia here, it's what are the firms doing with your curriculum. I take a step back because I have a lot of interactions with academia, and really it's a partnership. Our professionals are your students right now, and it would be somewhat silly for us to think that we're the only ones shifting our curriculum. If you looked at your curriculum that you've done in school and or how you've delivered it, you've made a lot of shifts. And so it's kind of that handoff part, and probably what just will be ongoing, continuing discussions is where that, if there is that gap of what we're getting after you send them and prepare them to us. But just like you mentioned about that group that looked at the curriculum, I could look back at ours from 3-4 years ago, and a lot of it's shifted down. But I have to imagine, and I know just anecdotally talking with some academia, that the same thing is happening there. And so it's bridging this handoff, if you will.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder, if you have questions, just feel free to raise your hands. I'll be looking for questions. Roger, maybe I'll turn to you for a moment. Around data analytics, so one of the things that you're focused on is using data analytics, cognitive, artificial intelligence. What are some of the tools that you're looking to help your teams implement in audits, and are there concerns around actually implementing those tools? I see you're laughing.
So we have just under an hour, and I think we'll use up the rest of the time to discuss that. The latter part of that question, in terms of concerns, they run a myriad of issues. You have issues with respect to understanding quality of data, understanding what the information allows you to discern to be able to work through the audit issues that we have to deal with. It's understanding no longer looking at perhaps the individual trees that may have been part of a sample, but the entire forest, and probably more importantly, the entire ecosystem around that forest. So is it understanding your competitors, it's understanding the industry trends, being able to discern what the true business risks are at an audit client so that you can figure out what's going to be relevant for you to be focusing on. Then when you bring it back to the question that you asked before in terms of first years, and you start thinking about, well, experienced auditors struggle with these issues. And now you introduce technologies that are really changing the landscape for first-year professionals coming in and working for us. And in many ways, you are automating many of the procedures that they've historically done. You have to have a change with respect to what you allow them to focus on, what they need to focus on, and you have to enhance their capabilities to be able to do that. The technology that we've been developing is geared towards that. It's trying to identify exceptions, outliers in terms of performance versus what we would expect from an audit lens perspective, but also then giving them the right questions, the right information to be able to go back and ask very pointed, very good questions, enhancing that professional skepticism that I talked about in the lead-in, to be able to say, here's why I'm concerned, here's what I need to look at, here's why you're going to be getting these questions from me. And that's a different experience for the professionals, because the years of sitting in an audit room and ticking and tying a sample of transactions and looking at across a large spectrum of different transactions, there's a high degree of probability that that becomes automated in a very significant way. Digital transactions being examined in one form or another to be able to look at 100% of transactions and analyze those. Add to that cognitive capabilities where you ingest unstructured data elements, contracts, invoices, and being able to pull out pertinent information from there. Comparing those two results electronically, digitally, you've changed the experience of what an audit professional has to be able to look at and be responsible for. And as a result of that, we all have an opportunity to change the landscape of what the students are learning, what they are going to experience when they come and work within an audit context, and I would argue enhance their understanding and set the expectations of what they need to understand to be able to execute and perform for all of our firms, for the profession, at a high level to be able to improve the quality of what we do. And I think that's an opportunity for all of us to think differently about where do we take their experience, how do we bring it into the KPMG Center down in Lake Nona to be able to enhance their understanding, make it more experiential so that they can truly understand the entire ecosystem around that forest and no longer just focus on the individual trees. It's not to say that you still don't need some of those basic auditing skills. You absolutely do. So they need to understand both, and they need to have all of the capabilities that we're starting to see how technology is bringing those together and changing that landscape for the future professionals and even our own.
And do you think, certainly for the first years and the people who are joining firms as this being the normal, it might be maybe easier, I don't know, but for those who are experienced auditors, as you mentioned, and getting them to look at results differently and getting them to take a very different approach, is it possible to convert existing auditors into the new type of auditor, or how much of a challenge is that?
So I think Maria said in the previous panel that we have been in business with not a high degree of disruption. I'm paraphrasing, so I apologize if I'm messing up a few of the words that she used, but she was saying we've been a profession, and I've said in other, Susan has heard me say it, in other sessions with the AAA, we've been a profession that has existed well over 100 years with the degree of disruption or change has been perhaps working from pen and paper or pencil and paper. I sometimes say quill, but taking it to an abacus, taking it to a calculator, the 10-key punch calculators with the complete drop down of the roll, of the paper roll. I'm getting really old school now. but taking that all the way through to computers today, tablets, the phones that we all have, notebook computing, and it's changed the degree of how we handle math, how we handle the documentation that we keep. It hasn't necessarily fundamentally changed exactly how we audit, and I would argue that's changing now. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing now is in the introduction of additional tools, additional capabilities that changes that element of it so that you can no longer deny that you can look at 100% of a client's transactions in some of their systems. I'm not saying it's easy. It's very complicated to be able to do that, but you have the ability to do that. And that ability will only continue to improve as more technology is brought together by the companies that we audit, as well as other technology companies that are making investments to bring data sets together. And you add into that additional capabilities around cognitive, artificial intelligence, and the landscape clearly, in my mind, changes so that when we're then looking at the auditors of the future, I think we all have an obligation to figure out how do we help prepare them in that environment. That's our challenge here.
That's great, thank you. Maybe Susan, we'll turn to you. So you are the director for the Center of Advancing Accounting Education.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
And one of the areas that you're focused on is technology and curriculum. And I know you host conference. The Accounting is Big Data Conference. Did I get that right?
Yes, it's the third year.
Okay.
Isn't that
I got it right.
exciting?
It is exciting.
So
can you tell us a little bit about it? Yeah.
Sure. The AAA understands that there are common problems that we have in practice and in academe that are only going to get solved if we work together. So the Accounting is Big Data Conference came about 3 years ago, And our goal is to have 50% practice, 50% academics, getting in a room together to discuss things that we can only solve if we both attack the problem together. So, for example, this year the hot topics are blockchain and tokens, or cryptocurrencies, and bringing the thought leadership in there so that we can start addressing that and how that's going to be a huge shift as well. And we're also doing this year 12 workshops. And the workshops leverage those things that practice does so well and is willing to share. So KPMG's audit module is going to be there. Deloitte's auditing with data visualization will be a 2-hour session. Data sets and exercises with audit analytics with Caseware IDEA. It's a forensic case, so that's something new and different. PwC is bringing Pixie Stems, toy company, which is data analytics classroom project. EY is sharing Helix, their general ledger analyzer, so that, again, we can start moving those work authentic, real world skills down into our curriculum in our classrooms. In addition, I don't know about you, but faculty do not do anything unless they feel confident in it and not stupid. And so there are hands-on workshops on Tableau, on Oracle NetSuite, so we can understand cloud-based accounting. There's also a data cleansing company called Data Watch that's going to do a 2-hour workshop on data cleansing. How do you prep your data for research or for your classrooms? There's curriculum innovation. Arkansas and Pittsburgh want to share their data analytics curriculum with us, so they're doing a 2-hour workshop. We're also talking about how to move data visualization and data analytics into the first courses in accounting. So that's important. Also something for program and department chairs on, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Session to kind of create what are the various avenues that you can go about solving your issues. And finally, research. The tools and the methodologies that you will use with data are different when it's big. When you're no longer doing that scientific, beloved method that you love, that you're going to an inductive world where you're looking for patterns, where you're looking, even your statistical tolerances change when you're dealing with large-scale data. So there's going to be sessions for you as well to figure out how do I retool, rethink my research methodologies. So that's just some of the fun things that we'll be doing September 7th and 8th in Brooklyn. Thank you.
Brooklyn, New York?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any other?
No, I don't know. I think there is a Brooklyn in the Netherlands, right? I think so. Just checking. Okay, well, let's move on. So, one of the things that continues to be a challenge for auditing firms is the varying skill sets at every level. Do any of you do anything unique or different to address the varying levels? And maybe you can share a little bit about what you do about it.
I'll start with a question to your question. Because based on what we're talking about, and a lot of times we're talking about the auditor of the future, and we're talking about what's being integrated into curriculums now at school. We're talking about then how this is going to impact our new hires, our second years. We have to consider that while it's auditors of the future, you mentioned we have experienced auditors now, and that wasn't their audit. And so there's also this component and challenge of leveling up, of working through when we're introducing something new that may be at a lower level, we have to have, and they mentioned it, Maria and Philip earlier, about tone at the top of the engagement team. That's a challenge to start out with too, of dual training, if you want to say, or learning, because we need that group who hasn't done it before to supervise and to guide. And it's a little different sometimes when you're supervising and guiding versus doing. And so I kind of look at it that there's a lot of things that when we come about and we're, let's say, relaunching, where we feel we might not have leveled up at certain levels that need to get caught up. I don't call this a spin, but basically we might make some assignments to them and say, hey, you're a manager, this is what your staff and senior, this is what we're teaching them and training them and how we're doing it. We need you to know this because you're the one that's going to be supervising them. In the end, too, we might also close some gaps and some knowledge gaps there, but that's just, again, not a spin, but we do say that you're supervising them and that's what you need to do. So I look at that as also a dual challenge. Sure.
To your question, Tal, one of the things we're now actively exploring, particularly for our first years, is variable pathing, because it recognizes that our first years, our new hires, they don't all come in with the exact same skill set. It used to be that we could all say they've got the baseline accounting and auditing, they do. But now we're seeing at the various universities different approaches to analytics, some incorporating a lot of analytics in their curriculum and some doing very little, for example. And so part of our first year experience, we believe, needs to be some type of analytics boot camp, but we're looking at assessment vehicles to say who needs to take that or not. So we're actually seeing variable pathing, which is going to make what we need to design, develop, and deliver much more complex, a lot more to maintain. But we think we're going to need more and more of that at all levels because of the different skill sets, because we're now looking to increase the percentage of non-accounting degree hires, both experiential and from campus. That's just going to require that we have, we're able to meet them where they're at and get them all to the same level.
It becomes personalized
Yes.
learning.
I think, too, when you're introducing technologies like this, and so I'm an auditor in the business 24, 25 years. I had to do my math real quick. And as I think about what I learned at a university and then what I've learned on the job and how I've developed over the years, and I look at what we're introducing now in terms of technology, that is not accomplished by someone with my background, someone who has just studied auditing and understood accounting issues and how to do an audit. It takes other skill sets now, IT skill sets, people familiar with systems, people that can work with our engagement teams, and they're very specialized. And being able to bring them together with some of our professionals, and I keep using the word experiential, bringing it to them to say, here's what our capabilities are, let's educate you on it, because we can do all of the live training, we can do all the messaging that we want, but until you give them a chance to actually see it firsthand, understand what it is we're talking about in terms of introducing technology and how you use it, it's hard sometimes for the older professionals to be able to say, okay, I get it, and I understand it. Because the theory around it is much different than when you actually see your own client seeing the data that you actually have access to, and then being able to say, oh, I understand what you're talking about in terms of automating a three-way match or reconciling that to cash, and when there's differences, what I have to do with that now. And it opens up their eyes in terms of what the technology can do. And then when you enhance it with additional visualization capabilities, analytical software tools that are becoming as easy to use as Excel is for everyone familiar with that, that's an additive element of what we're introducing to the professionals to say, here's what is capable, here's what you're able to enhance your skill sets with. And dealing with that change and getting people comfortable with that is all part of the in-person training, the messaging that we have, and the hands-on experience. It's all of those things that we have to bring to bear to be able to get people to truly understand what it is that we're able to do an audit now. And when they get it, it really is exciting to see how it takes off and how they become then the messengers for the next group of teams that they work with, and starting to introduce that into other clients as well.
So I'd like to add kind of the baseline. Students and individuals learn differently, and one size does not fit all. So one of the things that is essential to laying the groundwork to all the things we're talking about is to understand, number one, what is their learning style? Are they, I see, I hear, I touch, I do. So one thing that I administer that's free and online is the VARK, V-A-R-K. So that allows them and you to understand how do they best approach learning. The second thing is
what does VARK stand for?
Visual,
Oh.
oral,
Oh, okay. No. Oh,
rhetoric,
okay.
and kinetic.
Okay.
VARK. So I would urge you to go out and take the VARK to see what kind of learner you are. The good news is, as you get older, you become multifaceted. So that's one thing. The second is something called the Teaching Perspectives Inventory. Again, it's online and free, and it allows you, either as the faculty person or if you administer it to your students, to figure out what approach is best for them as far as learning. Are they somebody who says, you know, I want an outline, I want PowerPoints, or are they more interested in the experiential? So it, again, gives me an artifact to know where they are, so I know if I make a difference. And then the last thing that I believe we should do in our classrooms is we all believe ethics is, you know, you think like I do, I know you do, because, you know, you're a smart person. No, they don't. So there's something that's called an ethics survey that, again, there is no right answer to these scenarios, but at least it elevates that everybody thinks and perceives situations differently, and it doesn't make them smart or not. It just means that we have multiple challenges to get them to that mindset that needs to be out there, that's professional skepticism.
That's great. Thank you. And our time is flying by pretty quickly. Oh. And I want to remind everyone that we do have microphones around if you have questions. I see we have a couple of questions, so we'll start over here.
So my name's Mark. I'm from the University of Illinois in Urbana. So when I hear you talk about technology and data analytics to the point that it's not just the abacus, but it's actually changing the way you work, I did start thinking about, you know, what are your perspectives on the staffing model that audit firms have used historically, where there's a couple that you source from, well, how's it changing your sourcing? Will you hire more data scientists as opposed to accounting majors? I know in our own Deloitte Center for of Analytics at Illinois, we actually, the director of it is a data scientist. And it's informing the accountants pretty easily. It's a easy job for him to do that. So are you going to have the same number of staff auditors being hired and migrating and promoting to seniors to manager? And if so, what kind of window are we looking at? When you look at the next 3 to 5 years, is it going to be sort of business as usual in terms of your human resources and recruiting? And it gets pretty foggy after that. So I guess if it's not changing in that window, when will these changes come? Or is it just still really too early to tell? One reason I asked this, by the way, is, you know, I think it was Jeff Brown, the dean at Illinois, had me read The Future of the Professions by Susskind, and it's a particularly bleak, in some ways, book about to what extent will you need human talent for professions. So just your thoughts on that.
All right, thanks, Mark. Good.
Sure. So recently there was a report that came out by Futurist that said what are the top 3 professions they believe are at, could actually go away based upon technology and cognitive and other blockchain and those types of things. And they were doctor, pharmacist, and accountant. So I do think it's, you know, we're operating in that broader context. Absolutely, you know, the work that we have our staff people do today, and even in the last 3 years, where they spend their time has changed substantially. Do we longer term view that the model might change? Absolutely. I think we're all doing pilots and trying to figure this out. I don't know exactly where it lands, but it will look different. One of the things that I've been working on with my team is around, okay, as this changes, how do we create managers, senior managers, and partners of the future that have the appropriate level of knowledge that can do the reviews, right? and do the reviews of what's coming out using analytics and cognitive technologies, et cetera. And so that's something we're spending a lot of time trying to think through. I don't have the answer. It's a challenge that excites me, but I do think it is a challenge for us.
And I'd say this is where operationally from a firm too, of where the sourcing is going to come from in the background is, as Eric mentions, is on our end to be adaptable to it because it might come in from diverging areas. It goes to your point also earlier about assessing someone's previous skill set of what they're coming in at. And so from our group, it's even going to be even less of one size fits all.
So I was really hoping that Eric and Michael had an answer because I was going to write it down too. And there's not an easy answer to that question, but I think there's actually some promising points to be made as well. And that is, from our perspective, when we're seeing the technology being used, auditor judgment gets enhanced, their ability to execute gets enhanced. And we talk about technology just in that manner, that it's about the enhancement of the professional, for them to be more skeptical, for them to be able to understand more information, being able to look at a larger set of transactions. And while we think about what the longer term implications are on our people, I will tell you that I have more conversations with executives from different companies about where they see no longer just the audit teams being disrupted by technology and the introduction of analytics, but the entire financial reporting model. Right. And they see it as an opportunity actually for accountants and the financial reporting groups where they can be owners of data within organizations and be that one center of truth and accuracy as it relates to data then that gets used in the various departments in an organization, so that you're helping the organization make better decisions from an operations perspective, an investment decision around what they decide to do long term, marketing, you keep going on down the list. So if that becomes an opportunity for accountants to be better in terms of analytical skills and being able to understand and harness data, working with that IT background, that in my mind is actually a good opportunity for us to be talking about with the students of tomorrow and all of our people in terms of helping them see what the value is of accountants, audit specifically. So, and I'll do a shameless plug from the standpoint of seeing that development. So we've started last year, and the first class kicks off in about 3 weeks with students going for their master's degree, where they're going and studying what does it mean to audit in this environment? What are the data and analytics capabilities that I need to have to bring together the technology that the firms are using, and we've made the investment to put our technology into the classroom, give case studies, give data for people to actually use. And I think that has the opportunity to really transform the people we hire, clearly, but I think also more broadly the financial reporting and the accounting community that I just spoke about. And so we announced last week that that's now going to be a program moving to 9 universities, and we're really excited about what that opportunity holds. And I think I'd love to see all of us, from a profession standpoint, make that type of investment and move forward to help the universities see the potential around all of these technologies and how they enhance an auditor, accountant, and really can help framework or set the framework for what the accounting profession looks like more broadly going forward.
Great, thanks. I think we have another question over there.
Oh, yes, thank you. I just wanted to pursue a little bit Susan's point about people learn, in different ways, and I get it. But what you've described is sort of daunting from a faculty perspective, because I usually think about the material, what it is I'm trying to accomplish, what's my learning objective, and what's the best mechanism for students to learn given that objective. And now you've just thrown in sort of this diversity. Well, people might learn differently, and so I have to think more broadly across that. So I'm just curious how what's central, what's core, what's more marginal, and what's my responsibility versus student responsibility for their own learning? Do you use these sort of tools for them to assess their learning, and then they can tailor the classroom experience based on that? Or do you, as a faculty member, try to tailor it based on this diversity across the class.
So I look at this as your declaration of independence, because you're going to be able to use your classrooms for those higher level skills, those integrated immersion experiences, what I call the twofers, that it's not just content-driven pedagogy, it's content-driven pedagogy in a context of experience, so that they have to experience it because then it's in their brains better. If we just do lecturing, throw it on the web, throw it on YouTube, become a YouTube star like me and make money. They send you a check every month. You know, Savannah, you could retire a rich woman. So think of it as giving you the freedom to do all the things you've ever wanted to do with your students and not be tied to a book, not be tied to what you did last time, to really think creatively. And if you can't think creatively, get together with 4 colleagues, and I guarantee you, you'll have a much funner experience.
Yeah, and we'll build on that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, building upon that, one of the things we've been trying to do is those weeks I mentioned for years 1 through 3 and 4 that all go to DU. One, they're predominantly simulation-based, so they're experiential. If at any point in time we need to teach a technical content, the rule I've given my team, and it's sometimes hard, but is there's never lecture longer than 10 minutes, period. And third, that we know repetition is important to building the neural pathways for recollection of the information we want them, but we try to make sure that when they're in that experiential simulation piece, we have visual, we have auditory, we try to repeat it in multiple different ways. So I'm not creating different versions where people have choice, but what I am creating is that I'm delivering it I'm ensuring that it's repeated in different ways, so that I'm trying to address it, this 10 minutes of doing the exercise this way resonates with this group of people, and the next 10 minutes we do it again, but a different way, it resonates with this group.
I can't tell you how many times people say or suggest, should we do it this way, this way, this way, or this way? And I just say yes.
Yep.
That's it. And it's exactly that. You need to mix it up. People are going to learn different ways, and we have some examples coming up of where we're talking in this next section that we probably could expand on more on it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the principles is, learning is not about getting information into people's heads. It's not about getting information in. That's a mistake that we've made for decades, which the brain science only recently really proved out. Learning is about teaching people how to retrieve it when they need it, and about creating those neural pathways so that when they need it, they know how to retrieve it. And so lecturing at people, most of us will forget, unfortunately. Hopefully you remember this conversation. You probably forget most of it, and that's the way the human brain actually operates. Without that context, you need the context and the neural pathways to actually make it stick. And so some of the ways that are relatively new, and this maybe we can transition to some of the innovative things that we're doing, and Eric, you mentioned one of them, simulations. So I know at EY we're doing a lot more of our audit curriculum is through simulations. It's not so much telling people the facts about the audit methodology or the facts about the accounting. It's about giving them access to that, but also having them applied in real world scenarios. So maybe we'll transition to hearing a little bit more about what we're doing, whether it's through videos or through simulations or other types of blended or flipped classrooms. Maybe, Michael, I know you're doing a lot with videos, aren't you?
Yeah. Speaking of online and free, the CAQ has some video vignettes. And really, if you think about it, case studies are always going to be a great way for training and learning. And to me, I just think a video, all that is just a visual case study. And so these vignettes that they have are maybe about 4 or 5 minutes each. It's digestible. There's teaching notes with it. And some of them, for instance, even this first one, it's interesting because we can repurpose some of them. And in that, while that one, the topic, you could use it topically, and that one happens to be about management review controls. And so if you're doing a session on that, use that as a demonstration of what might take place, what might happen. But at the same time, too, we're also using it in our client interviewing classes. because we might not let the whole 4 or 5 minutes run. We just might let the first 35 seconds. Brian's in that video, so is Margot. And we might say, what do you think Brian should ask next? And we have to like really break it down to make it very deliberate, because that, in effect, simulates what happens. The times of having long case studies that are a page or 2 pages, you could still draft them up, but don't deliver them that way, because that doesn't simulate what happens in real life of coming out to a client and you hear the whole story. You have to actually find out what some of the story is. So I've had like subject matter experts where, yeah, go ahead, put a case study together, but I might deliver it in 12 parts, where breaking it down very little, very little. And I find videos to be very helpful from that standpoint of being able to pause it versus, where people can get certain fact situations and project out what should happen next, what might happen, what would you do, or what would you expect.
Yeah. How about, yeah?
Well, I think one of the things that we see across, whether it be technology in the audit or new standards being implemented, very highly specialized areas are things that we're encountering and have been encountering, but thinking about it through centralization of services in terms of team members being led by individuals that have a deeper understanding, industry understanding, topic understanding, IT understanding, whatever the element is, being able to introduce that to an engagement team and having more thoughtful conversations, directed conversations than with those central teams, to be able to help people understand what is it that they're looking at, understand the context of what they should be doing in terms of questions to seek answers to, or other ways that they might approach audit areas. And I think that capability, having the experts in the room, maybe not physically, but virtually, or certainly by a phone call, to be able to experience through their eyes what is it that they need to focus on, I think is a great way to enhance what the professionals encounter. And again, getting it to them in a real-time, impactful way that it makes a difference in the execution of the audit.
Yeah. Eric, were you going to say something?
To me, one of the principles that I've seen really come to fruition over the past few years is what I call the principle of chunking. How do we deliver things in small bite-sized pieces, right? There's studies out there that show if you were to put a 1-hour video out there, or you to put a 6 10-minute videos out there, you get a higher level of completion of the 6 10-minute videos than you do of the 1-hour video. The learners of today are hardwired to focus just for much smaller chunks of time. They so easily get distracted. So we need to meet them where they're at. We need to recognize that and develop things. We've been developing what we call a flash learning platform, and trying to deliver a variety of different types of learnings in different modalities, but nothing longer than 7 minutes if possible. That's the target I challenge my stakeholders. Can you get this under 7 minutes? There's a lot of data that's now even showing that that time is even shrinking of what people are willing to pay attention to. But
we call them learning bites, and so sometimes someone projects 20 minutes, and I said, that's a meal. Right. That's not a bite. So I'm with you on the timing.
Development professionals, we need to be able to develop those things at a much faster pace and get them out there. We can't take 6 or 12 months to develop those things. We need to be able to get things out there in a week or 2 and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So may I share from
Please.
YouTube?
Yeah,
so on YouTube, you get all kinds of data about your impact. And 3 minutes, they click off. And that's called attention. So 3 minutes or less, guys. They just don't do well. Otherwise, make a playlist. Things that I can add to this, experiential learning, putting them in. At Emory, we have Weekend Capstone. It's a forensic case. They are dumped with a bunch of data. They have like 3 hours to analyze that data in their team. They then have to go in and interview the suspect. They learn a lot about how to interview, how to approach an interview. They have all that background information about how to interview. Some of them are very shocked when the witness runs out on them and says, really, I don't have time for you. So they learn a lot that way, and then how you deliver so that they learn how to be precise and succinct by doing something called a pechakucha. Pechakucha is 20 slides, 20 seconds a slide presentation. Because it's captured on video, you can look at it later. You have artifacts of learning for whatever you need it for accreditation purposes. So it allows you to, again, get a twofer. Something for the student and something for yourself.
Yeah, and I will also say that I know we have a couple of questions. The CPE standards have been evolving as well. Right. And so historically, a CPE hour was a 50-minute hour, but they now have the ability to get certified for blended learning and nano learning, although I don't think all the states have adopted it yet.
No, only 2 or 3.
Yeah, so we're working through that because it's hard to tell people that, yeah, you can get credit, but in this state, but not in that state, and it gets very confusing to manage it. So we're actively working. I know many of us are working to make sure the states get through it. Let's go to a question over here.
Hi, I was wondering, is there any effort to help students learn to pay attention longer? Because an audit doesn't happen in 3-minute sound bites, right? And so I feel like, okay, you can give it to them in 3 to 5 minutes, but the reality is they actually need to be able to comprehend information over days and weeks and months in order to perform their work appropriately. So if you could comment on that, that would be great.
Right, teaching people how to learn and how to,
So there's a concept called scaffolding. And scaffolding, it says you take them where they are and you, through successive approximation, move them to where you want them to be. So you always have to take a student where they are, 3 to 5 minutes max, multitasking individuals, and think about how do I incorporate their technology that are glued to their hand into the learning process and make the material interesting enough that they will engage longer. And I know they engage longer because they play games, don't they? And they don't leave their house for days because they're playing games. So to me, if that is where they are, then I need to think about learning experiences that are that exciting and that engaging. But I think it's a great challenge for us going forward.
Are any of you doing anything that's...
Well, I would say that, one, I think by the time we get them, they are so hardwired to that small attention span. Yeah. You've got to create the experience that causes them to want to engage longer, okay? Mm-hmm. And if it's just giving knowledge, then it's hard to create that experience. When we do our week-long simulations, all of a sudden, if they've got to go do a role play with a partner, mm-hmm. okay, all of a sudden now they got skin in the game, they will really focus. But we have to put those things around it to drive an increased level of engagement.
Yeah.
So the 2 things I would mention, the technology that we have, the audit platform that we have, we're thinking about from a design perspective to think about it in the context of how do they use these tablets, how do they use a smartphone, being able to toggle on and off, just down to the very switching of sliding that across the scale to be able to say, we have a risk of fraud, and drilling it into how they actually use technology today to make it easier for them to understand where there are going to be elements that they have to make some decisions. So some of it can be introduced into technology itself. I think another piece of it is getting into the classroom. So again, I go back to the master's program, being able to have some of our professionals go back into the classroom and work at the universities that we all graduated from, and helping them to understand what we're using technology for, how we want to have them engage with us, giving them the real life stories and situations of how we are encountering what we do in connection with audit, and getting them to have more skin in the game, to understand what is it going to mean to be able to talk to a partner when they're asking me these hard questions based upon information that's been presented to them. I think it's like some of the issues we've talked about before in terms of trying to figure out where all these solutions can come from. It's a myriad of places. There's not a silver bullet out there that we can all point to and say, here's the solution. There's no easy button to be hit. We try all the means necessary to be able to get people to understand and come along for that journey that we're on.
Yeah, and I'll just add, to your question around how do you get people to really focus on learning. None of us, because we're all human beings, none of us learn if we're not engaged and we're not focused and we don't feel like it's a moment of need. If we feel like this is important and we feel like this is something that I'm actually going to need to be doing, and it seems to be real life and it's exciting and it's interesting, that's when our brains turn on and we're ready to start recording. In the simulations that the panel here have been talking about, the idea is that you create experiences that people are working in teams, working in groups, very similar to the way that they're working in their engagements in real life on audits. Sometimes creating a little bit of a competitive element to it. So I know some of these simulations that we're talking about, I know we have simulations where people compete against each other, and as they make decisions, sometimes they're almost incentivized to make bad decisions, or the wrong decision, not bad decisions, the wrong decision, because that's when you learn. Because when you learn, if you lost points for making a wrong decision, you start asking yourself, okay, what could I have done differently and better? And it's those types of moments that you have insights that stick with you, that create those neural pathways, because now you have context. Very often, people used to talk about content being king. Content is not king. Context is king. You could throw lots of content at people. You're not going to remember. They're not going to remember it. It's when they have the context in the context that they'll actually be doing it in real life. And I know that's a lot of what we're all doing with our learning. I think we have another question back there. Let's do that one. Catherine.
Actually, my question was very similar to Kim's, and it came up because you started in talking about discernment and critical thinking, which is an area where I do a lot of research, and if those are the goals, learning a little piece here, a little piece here, a little piece over there is, it's hard for me to see how that gets you there.
I think we're talking supplements to it. And not, I don't think our whole catalog are 3 to 5 minutes of everything. Because it's more so of where we were talking earlier about the pull. When people, they might have been in a training classroom, but then when they're out in the field and they're doing something, they need to pull to remember what it is. They're not going to go back to listen to a 1-hour webinar, but they will listen to a 3 to 5 clip that's specific to that point. I think a lot of this that we're saying are even within your week-long simulation or a 3-hour session that we have, within that is the different type of simulations, the different type of engagements that go from where you were saying lecture for a few minutes and then move on to something else and cases. So I think it's kind of a combination of these collection of these, and some of those that we're talking about are more on-the-job performance support of pulling, of reiterating on learning.
Making things available, yeah. And I would say, just as, we haven't talked about this, but as I walk around in different classrooms that we deliver, people aren't taking notes anymore. I don't know if you noticed this. People don't take notes in classes. Do you notice the same thing?
Yeah, because they figure they can just go they can access whatever they need.
Or they take pictures.
They take pictures,
Right.
but people aren't taking notes. And if we give them materials, very often they're not lugging around the materials with them. They want things electronically, and they want to know where to go get it when they need it. And I think that's what we're really talking about here, is that performance support.
Yeah. And also, to hit on the critical thinking too, even in our simulations, we purposely try to simulate what happens in engagements. So we might have a simulation where they need to make selections and pull 7 invoices. They have to ask for it to the controller. We give it to them, and as it turns out, we really only gave them 6. And we're just waiting for that one person to say, wait a second, where's that 7th one? Simulate the controller saying, oh, I'll get it to you later on. I have a meeting later today. And we move on to another work area. 10 minutes later, though, the fake controller comes in and says, oh, here's that invoice. And then it becomes a teaching moment by the facilitators. Do we continue with accounts payable, or do we go back to finishing up with this one invoice that we need to vouch, and we discuss it? So a lot of it is kind of disrupting even in the classroom to simulate what happens out in engagements.
Well, the classroom's all about integration. All these pieces are outside the classroom. You're the great conductor that makes that orchestra of all those little pieces sing. So,
The other piece I was going to add that I think helps with this is that we need to have more moments, what I call extreme success and extreme failure, okay? Because that you build stronger neural pathways then. And it can highlight to them in the area of discernment or critical thinking that they're actually not as good as they thought. So there's one place where we actually have them review an internal control document that looks beautiful. Every box is filled in. It's very verbose. It looks wonderful. There's 33 fatal flaws with it. Okay? We find on average people only get 8. And that's a moment in the classroom where we say, you are horrible. Okay? And we need to do more of those. And I find when you have those extreme moments, and that's something you can do very quickly in 10 minutes, but you have those extreme moments, that causes them to say, whoa, I actually need to be more engaged. Yeah. This really does matter.
attention.
Yeah. So we have a question back there. Yep.
Yeah, so my question is, we've talked a lot about the what we teach. We've talked a lot about what we deliver, how and what. But we haven't talked about the who, and Susan, you talked about, you know, these great orchestra conductors. And I'm from Deloitte. I have 39 years in the profession, so a little longer than you. And I lived in a world where we kind of viewed that everybody, because we're in an apprenticeship model, needed to be an instructor in training sessions. And I'm just curious as to where are the firms today in terms of thinking that everybody's great at teaching, and therefore everybody will teach. And this is also with a dilemma that we have, that we want everybody to deliver the same learning, so that somebody who takes learning in San Francisco and in New York and in Japan walks out of that classroom with the same content. And this is maybe the other side of your question, Giovanna, is students learn differently. But my guess is that if I took you and I took Denise and I took Mark and I asked you to teach something and gave you an objective, you'd all teach it differently. But we sort of go to this approach of saying, well, we want everybody to deliver it the same, even though the instructors might have different styles of teaching. So probably a lot of questions embedded in that one question, but just any kind of observations in terms of where are we today and where are we heading from the who is providing the delivery of the learning, or who's the orchestra conductor in Susan's case.
I'll start. I think there's a couple of ways to answer that multiple question that you posed. I think working with universities and having some of their faculty working with us and in some of our programs and actually helping us to educate our educators. You know, I've made the comment to the people in our Learning and Development Center, we're not professional educators. We have a number of people that have a passion for it, that have an interest in it, that come and help us teach that, and teach the various content. And we take that depending upon what the messaging is. If it's very specific to a topic, we have to have expertise in that area, and we have to have people that are well skilled and have the ability to instruct. But we can learn a lot from the academic community and the faculty that work with us in terms of delivery. And how do we make it, going back to the point over here, where it's going to be impactful for the professionals that we have, as well as then future professionals. So I think a combination of subject matter expertise, clearly we need to have that in the classes, particularly when it's heavy specific content, whether it be industry or accounting or audit. Having other faculty resources or resources to pull from, such as faculty, helps add to the content that we can deliver. And then I think having it in a facility that allows for that type of interactive capability, so people can get up and learn and experience it firsthand, ask questions firsthand, and be able to really get into the depths of what's expected of them and how they deal with the issues that are at play. I think those are some of the things that go into how we develop, from a learning standpoint, the environment that's best. Could we improve? Probably, and certainly we try, but that's where we begin.
Anyone else?
Well, it's nice thing to say is I do not believe everyone is a great instructor or facilitator in the classroom just because they're really great at what they do. One of the things we've been doing over the last couple years is, while we believe in a leader-led model, our people teaching our people, is for our programs creating, you know, we call them faculty pools. So people apply, they're selected, they get recognized for it now, and we invest in their development, and then they teach that same program multiple times. And if they can't teach their commitment, they got a horse trade as well. So what it's done is it's greatly reduced the number of people we have to have. We have the same number of slots, more or less, but greatly reduced the number of people. We can invest in their development, and these are people that want to be there. And then we try to think about, the other thing I'd say is that if you've got the right design of a program that mixes in a lot of the different types of elements, then you enable the different facilitators, if they're following the program, to be able to try and meet all the different learners where they're at.
So what I would add is superior teachers come in all shapes and sizes and all different perspectives. And the last thing I would want for all of us is that we have commodity-based education, that what we personally bring to our classrooms is the value creation of going to this university versus that university, going to that teacher, whatever. But what we have in front of us is the ability to share and to measure the impact of all those different teachers and the value that they do, because they do it differently. And that is the great part about being faculty.
Right.
But Susan, in a firm, I want a senior accountant in Japan have the same skill sets as a senior accountant in San Francisco.
And
Therefore, I can't tolerate that difference that you talk about of saying they're competing on who's better in terms of being a teacher or an instructor. And so I think it's a challenge within a firm that's different than the university campus, where you are competing to generate the best students, and you don't care that they're not all identical or have identical skill sets.
I will talk to you after our clock is over.
I mean, I'll just add one more thing on that. So we have a global audit curriculum, and it's largely based around simulations. And the ability to teach simulations, and I'm sure you all would agree with this, is a very different skill set than teaching the traditional PowerPoint type curriculum. There's a lot more Socratic type dialogue. There is, so it's questioning, it's debriefing. The value of the debrief in every round of the simulation is escalated compared to every module in a traditional PowerPoint type formatted course. But the simulations that all of our people go through, and I'm sure it's probably not that different from my colleagues up here, are the same around the world. So while when that simulation is delivered in Japan, it's translated into Japanese, there will be the cultural nuances that'll come through when the facilitator in Japan is teaching, but they're going through the same scenarios. So with that, we are at our time. I want to take a moment to help me thank our panel. And we'll be around if you have other questions or would like to continue the conversation.